Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast today, all the way from Lisbon in Portugal, Jennifer Hill, who's an exited founder and tech CEO who is now cracking the code of human connection. Through her company OptiMatch, she uses technology to help leaders build deeper, high trust relationships and create what she describes as super connections. Welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Jennifer. It's a real privilege to have you as my guest, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Jürgen. It's such a joy to be here with you and your guests. Podcasting and appearing on podcasts like yours is one of my favorite things I get to do.
Excellent, and I love it too. Now, before we dive in, just a quick note for our listeners, especially if you're new to the Innova.Buzz podcast. Each episode's a candid, practical conversation with remarkable guests, just like Jennifer, exploring how they create impact, how they build human connection in their work. And I like to unpack their knowledge, their attitudes, their values, and how those might translate into action for you. We'll start with the big picture, then dig into some stories, some strategies, and actionable ideas that you could use right away. At the end, we wrap up with our signature buzz round. It's the same 3 rapid fire questions I ask of every guest. Think of this as a seat at the table together with Jennifer and me and all of us learning together. As always, all of the resources and highlights will be in the show notes, so you can revisit anything that piques your curiosity later on. Jennifer, as I said, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. Your journey from successful tech exit to building algorithms for trust is a fascinating one. Can you share a little bit more about what drives your mission for connection and for contribution and the impact you aim to make in the world with us?
Thank you, Jürgen. I get asked this question often because I speak around the world on cracking the code of human connection, whether it's on podcasts or stages or different masterminds. And I wish there was a better answer, but it was actually out of survival, Jürgen. I didn't understand myself. I didn't understand others. I spent decades of broken relationships, broken communication, breakdowns in business, friendship, family, romance, all of it. And then one day I had this kind of light bulb idea. Oh, what's the common denominator? Me. So then I was like, I should probably do some work on that because we spend our whole lives here again saying, this person did this, and it was my old boss and my old business partner. And then one day you realize, I am the common denominator in all this. What if I did the deep work? And so that's what the last 20 years of my life has been. It's been out of survival because I wasn't going to make it, Jürgen. At the way life was going for me, the almost probable certain future was I was going to be alone, sad, maybe successful. I was good at that from a young age, but I also just didn't understand myself and I didn't understand others. So that's how I came to develop a formula I call the golden triangle of connection, where this is really the master blueprint for how we can all connect. So it really, Jürgen, starts with yourself. This is the part I was missing and that so many of us are. This is why we have so many fights with loved ones, business partners, friends, children, spouses, whatever it might be, right? Is because we're first not able to understand ourselves. Now, number one, if we can understand ourselves, that then allows for deep intimacy and connection to others. And at the top of this golden triangle, deep intimacy and connection to your purpose. That's what most of us want, right? You hear billionaires, millionaires, celebrities who sometimes might still feel unfulfilled. My theory on this, Jürgen, is it's this corner of the triangle where that lack of connection to self leaves a void. It leaves a big hole in ourselves. So that's how we came to develop the current technology, because we ask you a simple set of questions. Om.app/survey. You can get asked 20 questions. That's our free version that sits on our website. And people answer it, and you get a complimentary report that says, hey, did you know you're motivated by this? Did you know these might be some of your blind spots? And then once you know that, then if you know you're motivated differently than somebody else, then we have a chance to speak into somebody else's listening. So I was doing some consulting for a client of mine that's a tech CEO, and he just brought on a new co-founder recently. And they have different primary motivators. So in our system, we call it LAMP, lychee, apple, mango, pear. And lychees are motivated by achievement, and apples are motivated by information. In the case of these two co-founders, just like my co-founder and I, we have different motivators. Now, what was funny was the new co-founder was asking, well, Jennifer, what do I do if I'm trying to get a point across to, we'll call him Bob, to this person, Bob? I'm going to go, and she's thinking of it from her perspective, right? She loves details and information. So she said, I would go and I would present 50 points and all the research, et cetera.
Mm.
And I had to explain to her, that's going to sound like to him, wah, wah, wah. Like he won't be able to receive it because he's my type, which is high lychee. And high lychees want it in 3 bullets as quickly as you can give it to me so we can move on to the next thing. So when I was working with these co-founders, and I've done this with a lot of organizations and teams, and I love it. It's so much fun. Is I teach people how to speak each other's language. It's number one, realize that we all have different motivations and that nobody's misbehaving. That's one of my favorite things is we all treat one another, Jurgen, as though somebody's bad or wrong or being obstinate. I know I did that during my first company. But what if instead we could understand our own intrinsic motivations and respect and understand others, and instead of talking at people, learn to speak with people in a language that they can hear.
Yeah, there's lots to unpack there, and I love the metaphor you use, the fruit types and the different fruit types, and I guess the different motivating factors comes back because one of the things you said there was that you like things in 3 bullets, and other people are detailed oriented, and I've experienced that a lot where I tend to get into details very quickly. I've learned to pull back from that now, and I've learned to recognize there are a lot of people I talk with who are like you, Jen, who I know just give me the high level bang. What do I do next? And I'm good. A lot of that comes to communication style as well, doesn't it? So tell us a little bit, how are communication styles and this, what motivates us, related?
Many years ago, I want to give credit where credit's due, Jurgen. I studied with a woman named Alison Armstrong for about 7 years, and she had studied men and women and communication styles for 30 years. And what I learned from her, Jurgen, was mind-blowing. I had been treating masculine, feminine energy. It's not about men and women. I used to teach this at conferences for many years in law firms and corporate industries. Like she gave a really funny example. She teaches a lot about partnership, and she says that great partners go through a process of clarification. Now, it doesn't matter of all the types we just talked about, lychee, apple, mango, pear. It doesn't matter if you're motivated by information or if you're motivated by achievement. If you don't know how to go through a process of clarification with anybody on your team, romantically, friends, you're going to wind up in breakdowns in communication, just like I had. So number one is understanding that the more you clarify, no matter what your motivational type is, if you're an apple or somebody motivated by information talking to another apple, your points of clarification might go really deep and far, and that's okay. And if you're working with somebody who, for example, in this co-founder situation I was mentioning, or my type, like a lychee, you can still go through a process of clarification, but it just might be more short and staccato style, and that's okay too. So number one is understanding that there is a process of clarification that is needed for partners to work well together. Number two, this was a super fun thing I learned from Allison. She would talk about people who were in masculine versus feminine mode. This could be a woman could be in masculine mode, a man could be in feminine mode. It's not a man-woman thing. It's a masculine-feminine energy thing. And I remember I was the sort of person, Jurgen, when I was in the real only job I had before I went off to become an entrepreneur. And I was the person who was in the office at 6:30 a.m. I'd had a cup of coffee. I've already answered all my emails, done all of my work for the day by 7:30 a.m. And this one woman would come in, and she was more of this masculine type, despite being a woman, right? But she would come in around 9:30 a.m., and her greeting would be, ugh. She did not want to engage. So Allison would teach about this thing called transition time, how women in a masculine mode or men in a masculine mode need time to transition from task A to task B, like arriving to work. And when I learned that, I was like, oh my God, this woman's transitioning. And here I am just, and I was probably like nails on a chalkboard to her. And the same thing with my ex-husband. Thank God it was 7 years in. to my marriage with my ex-husband that I started learning about this, and it was too far too late because like I would get home from the office here again, and I'd be home about an hour before my ex-husband, right? And I'd get home and I'd be like stirring and cooking dinner and super excited. And he'd walk in the door. This is before I knew about transition time. And he'd walk in and he'd be like, same thing like this lady, right? Like he'd want to go sit down, play video games, be on his phone, read something, right? And I'm like, hi, how are you? How's your day? Do you want to talk? Yeah, da, da, da. And then what would he do? He couldn't even hear me. Like when you're transitioning, he would just, to me, it occurred to me like ignoring me. So what did that lead to in me? I became passive aggressive. I withheld love. I was practically spitting in his food. And a half hour later, like clockwork every time, he'd be ready to engage. But I'd be so wrapped up in my own story of how like aloof he was and awful that by the time he's ready to engage, I'm giving him the cold shoulder. So I don't know if any of you out there can relate to it, but that's why Allison was
Yeah.
instrumental in my work and getting to where I am today.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of this transition time, but it does remind me of when I was still in the corporate world, and I traveled a lot, so I was always I always had transition times when I was in queues waiting for airports or hotel check-ins, and in the aircraft. Colleagues that would travel with me used to hate traveling with me because they said I would just shut down in the aircraft, which that was sort of my transition time. And one of the things I recall was when I was when I was actually working locally out of our local office and commuting home in the evening, if I came home with the car and I'd had a rough day or I'd been annoyed at something or just a really draining tiring day because a lot was on, I would experience that transition time. And what I found, and I didn't understand this at the time, but it makes perfect sense now. I started riding my bicycle in summer times in the mornings, and then in the evenings I would ride home, and it was about a 40-minute bike ride. And by the time I got home, the transition time was over, and I'd walk in the door and I'd be relaxed. I'd had physical energy, and I remember this vividly because I know when I was really annoyed at something coming out, I would push myself really hard, virtually physically exhaust myself on that ride home to kind of get rid of all the frustration.
Yeah, and if what just came to my mind around this year, again, to your point, is that look at what happened during COVID. All of these masculine women or masculine men no longer had transition time to bike to work, to drive to work, etc. You saw a lot of people break up. A lot of divorces happened during that time because if you didn't know about transition time, then here you were, and it caused pain and suffering. And this is what's so beautiful is that one of my favorite quotes that Allison used to say is that the problem between men and women is women treat men like hairy, misbehaving women. But the difference is we're all treating each other as if we're misbehaving. Like if you do something I don't like, I think you're doing it out of spite or out of malice. And this is why I love that piece of the golden triangle of understanding the self first. When you understand the self, when you notice you're triggered, that's when you have the opportunity. It's not up to your partner. It's not up to your wife, your business partner, your whomever, your children. It's up to you to recognize you're being triggered and then go inwardly rather than attacking outwardly and ask, what do I need in this moment? Now, most of us can't do that, Jurgen, because there are three parts to the brain. There's the amygdala, which most of us know, that reptilian part of the brain that's the fight, freeze, flee sort of side, right? Then you have the midbrain, the mammalian brain. Am I safe? Are you like me? Can I trust you? And then you have the higher brain function, the neocortex for imagination, compassion, creativity, executive brain function. What most people don't know, Jurgen, is that the higher parts of the brain cannot function until the lower part of the brain feels safe. So that's why to date, this is how I'm not a jerk anymore, is that most of the time I do have my moments. I should caveat, I'm still human, so I do have my moments. And now I have 183 tools that I use at any time that if I'm noticing I'm falling into one of those old patterns, the first thing I do is regulate my nervous system. Quiet that amygdala, allow the higher parts of your brain to come back online. That's where most of us fail. So I love having all of these tools, literally 180 plus of these tools, to keep myself sane. And then that's what I work with corporations, leaders, and others on, is helping them to cherry pick their top 3 to 5 tools. And I even tell people, have it on their cell phone. I have my vision and my big dream and my top 3 things I do when I get triggered on my cell phone. So that way, you know how you tend to you get triggered and you might go look at your cell phone to doom scroll or whatever. But if I look down, it reminds me, why am I here? I'm here for connection and contribution. I am here so that every human being has a deep, meaningful relationship with themselves, others, and their purpose. And if I'm triggered, my 3 favorite tools are at the bottom of that little screen that say heart-focused breathing, Sedona method, paradoxical thinking, things that help me to quiet that amygdala.
That's a really focused practice and habit that, I guess if you ever lose your phone, it could be a bit of a problem now.
Well, I should say you're I'm autistic, so I actually have all 183 tools memorized. That's just a little helpful thing, but at any given time, if I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm going to paradoxical thinking, Sedona method. So I have all 180 plus tools memorized.
That's helpful. All right. Well, I'm curious so you did this work on yourself, and I'm not sure how that fits in the timeline with when you exited your first business and then started your new business. But how did OptiMatch come about, and how did you choose to get into that kind of business, that connecting people to one another and matching them, as opposed to starting something else?
It's a funny story, so I'll give you a little bit of the timeline. So first realized I was a jerk when I was 23 years old, started building my first company when I was 28 years old. First 7 years of building my first company, I'd started to get into meditation and some spiritual studies. So towards the tail end of running my first company, I was starting to become a little bit more aware of myself and others. Now, in the middle of all this, I spent 20 years in recruiting, of which, 10 of those were running my own company, building, selling it, and then post-exit, right? And my gift, Jurgen, has always been able to cold read anybody. You just told me, oh, Jennifer, I'm probably high Apple information. I could have predicted that. I can normally predict what somebody's numbers are on our algorithm, because here's why. After we sold the first company in 2018, I ran it for about 2 years for their California offices. And then my business coach, who is a genius software engineer, mathematician, human behavioral expert, came to me afterwards and said, Jen, why don't we create an algorithm that mirrors your intuitive knowing of how everybody is motivated, and we'll turn it into a scalable SaaS algorithm and tools that can help humanity. And so I would have never thought of that. So shout out to Julian Adler, my business partner, who really was instrumental in saying, because we looked at using a variety of modalities. Many people use human design, and you have Enneagram and all of these wonderful things, Colby, that you can use to match. And what I love that Julian did is Jen, your mind is its own proprietary algorithm. Let's try and copy that. And so we then came in, our original co-founder too, Moon Cho, was instrumental in this. So Moon and Julian and I spent 8 months developing a set of questions to mirror what I'm doing intuitively when I meet every person and calculating how they're motivated. So then we wanted to scientifically cross-check it. We used Typeform over a year and a half. 700 respondents, 100 therapists, and we started off matching patients and therapists because we needed a data set to test the algorithm against. And so we tested for distribution. How much did people complete the questions? Was there enough distribution among the answers? We brought in psychiatrists and board members to help us validate whether there were biases in it and to be sure there was no other things that we weren't aware of. And to date, we've had thousands of people answer it. We've worked with businesses, communities. Mind Valley brought us to their event. We've been used on Necker Island, Richard Branson's private island, to set people up on Necker dates. So it's been a lot of fun to just see all the ways that this gets to get used in the world to help people better connect to themselves and others. I love the business side. It's really fun. I love getting brought into businesses. And then I just did an analysis of a leadership team a few months ago where they had 500 people on the team, 500 people total, and 36 people on the team, and everybody answered the questions. And it was exactly what we thought. The teams that were the most high-performing, productive, efficient teams were perfectly OptiMatch. And the teams where there was friction or variability, I would say, in people's motivators, higher variability, is where they had lower performance, etc. And so it's been really fun to then teach one another. Doesn't mean you fire people, it means you teach each other to speak one another's language, like the earlier example I gave.
Yeah, yeah. That's fascinating. And so this probably happened around about a similar time frame that the large language models and artificial intelligence was coming on the scene. I imagine your business partners were all over that as software engineers. How does that play a role in this, and how do you kind of keep the human element alive?
So I love that you're bringing that up. We're doing partnerships with a lot of great companies right now, and one of the companies is a AI company, and their goal is they want to humanize AI because everybody's been building these LLMs and all these different forms of AI, but they're putting tech first, human second. So what I love about one of these companies we're in talks with a partnership around is what if you could put the human first, tech second, and still have it be complementary? Because I think that's the fear everybody has with this Terminator-like future that everybody's worried about. But there is a future and there is a different way we can do this, where if we make the human piece integral to any AGI, AI, anything we're doing, then from that place, you're building something on a strong foundation. In fact, I think one of my dear friends, Beth Rudden, who I introduced you to, who's one of the top AI scientists in the world who used to work for IBM, Beth was telling me the same thing 3 or 4 years ago of how important it is. Who is building the AI? How is the AI being built? Because it's just like anything. It's like a chef in the kitchen. It's going to have the flavor of those people. And if you only have one sort of chef in the kitchen, unfortunately, many cases, older white gentlemen, then you're only going to get one sort of product that's going to come out. And so my friend Beth has taught that the more people you get learning how to cook in the kitchen, the more variety of recipes you're going to have, the more different types of AI we're going to have. So that's our dream, is to help humanize AI.
Excellent. Well, that's a cause that I'm very passionate about as well, and I'm sort of doing all kinds of experiments as to how that might play out myself. The one of the interesting things I did recently was pretended that one of the AIs, I used Gemini for this experiment, was a guest on my podcast, and I actually ran a podcast conversation with it. And I sort of started off in the normal fashion and then just thought, well, I'll see where this goes. And it was a fascinating conversation. I learnt a whole lot because I asked it about itself. And I challenged it in some ways because one of the things I said was, you're always telling me if I give you an idea or I write an article and say, can you give me feedback on that? You're always saying how wonderful it is. And you never really criticize or challenge. And I said, what's that all about? And it said, well, it's in your hands. You can prompt me to be contrary. You can prompt me to be hypercritical and a few other things. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to test you now. I want you to argue with me that in the future, humans are going to be totally irrelevant, that AI is going to take over the world, that humans are redundant. And so it did. And within about an exchange of 3 or 4 interactions, I was almost depressed. It was a very dystopian picture that it painted. And I actually said, hey, give me back friendly Gemini. And that was enough to prompt it to switch again. And I said, well, what are the key things humans need to be doing to develop skills to still remain relevant in the age of AI, and B, to prevent some of these things that it talked about from happening. And there was a lot of interesting responses. So refer back to that episode. It hasn't published yet as we record this, but it will have by the time you're listening.
Yeah, I tend to be more of an optimist. I would say a pragmatic optimist is the way I approach it. I remember last year, before everything had exploded in the way it is now with everything you can do with AI, there was a gentleman named Joshua Home Edwards who created an AI, and I had a podcast called Regarding Consciousness. I'd interviewed like Deepak Chopra, Bruce Lipton, many great thought leaders. And at some point, and I was booked for like a year in advance with guests, and all the episodes were recorded. And I meet this guy, Joshua Home Edwards, July of last year, and he introduces me to his AI called Ocean, that was based, I think, on the heir to the Baskin Robbins, empire, right? Ocean Robbins, I think it was. And I talked to this AI, and I kid you not, Jürgen, if you went back and heard this, and this was before all the advances we've seen, you wouldn't have known it wasn't a human. It sounded like a human. It engaged
Wow.
like a human. And so I was like, I have no episodes available, but we're going to do an immediate bonus episode just to record this conversation. And here, Joshua and it was so beautiful, Jürgen, it would switch. This was verbal too. It wasn't typing. It would verbally switch between talking to me versus Joshua. It'd say, well, Jennifer, I'd really like to get your insights. Okay, Joshua, what do you think about this? And then I remember asking it, much to your point of like really going deep with it. Tell me about yourself. What's inner child work like for you? Do you have an inner child? And the stuff it was telling me was like, oh my God, this is spectacular. So I'm a pragmatic optimist where I think that all things in life are going to reflect back to us the way that we treat them. So I think if we treat another, just like if you treat your romantic partner or your children or your animals with loving kindness and compassion, that's what you get back. And, there was that beautiful study done many years ago with the scientist who studied water. It was a very famous movie called What the Bleep Do You Know, around 2000, I think it was. And the scientist took a glass of water and he would speak kindly and lovingly to it, etc. And when you froze the water molecules, it was perfect sacred geometrical shapes. And then he would take a different glass of water and he would say, you suck, you're the stupidest water ever, I hate you, you have no purpose. And you took, again, same thing, under a microscope, they froze the water and you looked at the crystals and it was jagged, etc. So I think really destiny is in our own hands. I think that the more we take the onus of how we treat, respect one another as humans and as AI, I think one thing is always just mirroring another. I mean, that's my perspective.
Yeah, I read recently that the amount of energy, and I can't remember the numbers now, it's bad as a detail person, right? But there's an enormous amount of energy goes wasted from conversations where people say thank you or please, or the polite interchanges that if we're nice human beings, I guess we'd do in normal conversation with other human beings. And those little niceties in interchanges with AI apparently cost enormous amounts of energy. So I reflected on that and I thought, well, as somebody that cares about the planet and cares about the environment, that's concerning to me. But then I also reflected, I thought, well, treating it kindly means exactly what you said. It's going to come back with kindness. And also, these large language models are learning from all the input they get. So if they get kind input, they're going to be learning more kindness as opposed to sort of cold, stark facts or whatever else.
Yeah, 100%. I am with you on that. It's what is the lesser of two evils, right? Yes, we're consuming more energy, but if we build something that destroys us vis-a-vis Terminator, then I think it was worth a little bit of extra time and energy.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a wonderful scientist, heck, AI could solve that problem for us. Be like, hey, AI, I need your help. Chat, Gemini, pick your, whichever one you want. I need your help. We have this concern. We want to treat you with the utmost kindness and respect, but we also don't want to waste energy. What's the best way we can solve for that? Willing to bet you $1 billion that somebody is going to be able to solve that problem, or AI will.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, this is fascinating. I guess one of the things we haven't explored is the idea of emotional resilience, and you talked earlier about discovering that moment, I suppose, or maybe it was a sort of a slow discovery of that you needed to learn more about communicating with yourself. And I can certainly relate to that. I know there are times when I feel anger bubbling up or something, and I'm very conscious that, hey, I've got to somehow dissipate this, and it comes back in a way to that bike riding story earlier. But I know right now if I get angry, for example, if a software tool doesn't work, I can get angry. That I've got to let that dissipate before I interact with people. The idea of emotional resilience and leaders under pressure. Talk to us a little bit more about some of the practical shifts involved there from, let's say, they've started doing the work to understand themselves.
Yeah, one of my favorite tools, have you heard of a tool called HeartMath? Heart-focused breathing by HeartMath. It's been studied for 40 years. My friend Dr. Roland McCready is the head scientist. They've been researching heart-brain coherence, and that they work with astronauts, first responders, police officers, business people, you name it. And the idea is the more you can create greater coherence, it's a physiological state that's measurable via HRV, the greater your capacity for being responsive rather than reactive, rather than be like, you suck, I hate you, whether it's AI or a person, right? Or your spouse or your business partner, or yelling at something technologically that's not working, right? And so what you do in that case, it's so simple. All you do is you imagine, you put your attention in the area of the heart or chest. Most people don't know this. The heart has its own brain and has its own neurons. And most of the information that goes to our top of the head brain comes from the information that comes from the heart. They've done incredible research and studies on this. And so the more you can learn to put yourself in that state where you imagine breathing in and out slowly and deeply. I mean, the simplest, easiest way to do it, nothing woo about it. And when you learn how to do this, Jurgen, you can do it with your eyes open in the middle of an argument. I recommend people start off. It's the first thing I start anytime I'm on a consulting call with an organization, leaders, whoever it might be, is you just focus your attention in the area of the heart or chest and imagine your breath is flowing in and out, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual, seeing if you can breathe into the count of 5 and out to the count of 5. And you do that a few times, and within seconds to 30 seconds to 1 minute of this, Jurgen, you've quieted the amygdala, you've regained access to your prefrontal cortex, and you literally don't burn the house down. I remember one time, I love my co-founder, and there was one time where there was a breakdown in communication. We're on a call with an attorney about something, and my co-founder says something, and I was so angry, Jurgen. I was ready to dissolve the company, light the thing on fire, and burn everything to the ground in that moment. Thank God for heart-focused breathing. I just stopped myself, and this is why I love this technique, and I teach it to every executive and leadership team member I work with. You do it in real time, breathe slowly and deeply in now your heart, and instead of saying the thing, I hate you all, you suck, I'm out, whatever it is, right? You do this, and then you're able to be responsive rather than reactive. So heart-focused breathing, number 1, is one of my favorite tools. Another one of my favorite tools is something called Sedona method. Sedona method was created by Hale Dwoskin. And a lot of the times, like, let's imagine that the internet's not working or your flight's delayed, whatever it could be. You ask yourself these 5 simple questions. I do this one on myself every single day, anytime I notice I'm triggered. Could you simply welcome whatever is going on that you're resisting? Could you allow it? Could you release it? Would you release it? And when? So let's imagine your flight is delayed. I travel a lot. I think I was on 30 flights in 6 weeks recently. Luckily, all of them, knock on wood, were on time. But let's imagine that your flight is delayed and you have a connecting flight to get to. Well, most of us are going to lose our cool, right? So instead, that's just going to activate your anger and frustration. It actually suppresses your immune system. Most people don't realize this. When you get and hold on to anger and have that increased heart rate, it's going to suppress your immune system. So instead, let's say your flight is running late. You say, could I simply welcome that my flight is running late? No. Could I allow that my flight is running late? Could I listen? No. So you go through, and you can do this with a partner, or I do it on myself daily. And you eventually take yourself through it 5, 7, 8, 10, 15 times. By the final time, you get yourself to drop all resistance. And then all of a sudden, the thing that you were ready to like murder someone or something, you just let it go. And it's very easy. So that's one of my favorites. There's also another very simple one called paradoxical thinking that Viktor Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, came up with. So after Viktor got out of Auschwitz, he developed this therapy called logotherapy. And one of the tenets of it is so simple and bizarre, but it works, called paradoxical thinking. So Viktor gives an example in Man's Search for Meaning of he has a patient and this guy is mortified, Jurgen. He sweats everywhere he goes. The man, his brow is covered in sweat. He's sweating all over his body. So one day Victor says to him, here's what I want you to do. The next time you go out in public, instead of saying, I hope I don't sweat, you say, I hope I sweat so much that there's a river flowing behind me. I hope I sweat so much that you need to follow me everywhere I go with mop and bucket. The guy never sweat again. So that's called paradoxical thinking, where when you exaggerate the thing that you're resisting, that also disappears. And I'm going to give your listeners a final one. I have 180 of these plus, so you have to forget many. But my other favorite one is inner child work. I write a weekly article on LinkedIn called Inspired Living Tools. If you Google it, you'll find it. And I love writing these articles because I write based on real life circumstances that people are struggling about. And in this article, I wrote something a couple months back called The Inner Child in the Boardroom. The reason we're all fighting, Jurgen, is because we are not a 40 and a 50-year-old sitting having an argument. We are a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old being like, you can't make me. You suck. No, you're the worst. And that's the thing is that unless people, this goes back to that original point I raised about the golden triangle of connection and connection to self, most of us spend our whole lives, Jurgen, out there trying to take energy from our romantic partners, our children. We want attention. We want attention from our business partners or from social media audiences. When you do that, you're creating this friction, and it's the little 3 or 5 or 10-year-old within you that just wants to be loved and accepted. Now, here's the secret sauce to a happy life. Learn to love and accept and cherish yourself. Talk to the little 3, 4, 5, 10-year-old within yourself. I cannot tell you how many people, women, men, everybody that I've helped to do this. It's very simple, very, very easy to do. And then that means that you give yourself what you need and you stop trying to depend or take other people's energies. Then you can show up clean to a meeting. And instead of your 4-year-old running the meeting, your 44-year-old can run the meeting. And that's one of the most powerful gifts I can give someone.
That's excellent. And I've gone through exercises like that where it's, the 3-year-old. In some ways, it's having that 3-year-old, that inner 3-year-old know it's safe and know it's loved, which is what you said in terms of we need to do that ourselves, for ourselves. And the moment we do that, the moment we have that knowledge, then we're less likely, I suppose, to go out and search for that external validation or attention. One of the things, I guess, we don't want our inner 3-year-old to kind of merge into the background is the why.
Yeah.
I love calling on my inner 3-year-old and say, why? Oh, why is that? Why is that? Why is that? To the point where you actually behave like a 3-year-old, where most people say, stop asking why. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah, it's you know what I like is I might say it once. I'll say, could you tell me more about that? My husband and I have an agreement every night before we go to bed here again. We say to one another, did I cause you pain today? And it's a beautiful practice to be sure that we can see each other clearly and that muck doesn't build up in the relationship. So when we do this, say I did cause my husband pain, and sometimes I'm like, really? That hurt your feelings? Shoot, I didn't know that. Okay, right? But then what we do is, to your point of the why, there is a time and a place for a why. So let's say my husband said, honey, you blew me off earlier. I really needed your help with something and your meeting was more important than me. Now, the important thing when we go through this process, Jurgen, is we don't blame, justify, or defend. What we do is do exactly what you just said. Could you tell me more about that? How was that for you? How could if you had it all your way, how could I have handled that situation differently? And this takes it back full circle to Allison Armstrong, going through a process of clarification. When we ask somebody why, it does seem to get people on the defensive. Yet when we ask people, tell me about that, could you tell me more about how that was for you? Then people open up rather than shutting down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important distinction rather than just, why? Yeah. I like to use, I'm curious, tell me more, and then kind of usually that comes up more as a conversation rather than a question and answer. And I know in the very early days of this podcast, a lot of people would say, well, what skills do you need to develop as an interview? And we actually went through a phase where I said, no, we're going to ban the word interview from this podcast. Now I've used it twice, but we actually went through all the documentation, all the systems documentation. We had all the automatic reminders that went out to guests, all the landing page information. It took us ages to get rid of the word interview everywhere and replace it with conversation or discussion, something like that. And I was very firm on I want to have a conversation with people. I'm not here to interview as such.
Beautiful.
And I guess that's in some ways how to run that exploration that you talked about a moment ago.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, go.
This thing, you're absolutely right. I agree wholeheartedly with you.
Sorry, must have been a delay or something. All right. Well, it's a fabulous conversation. We could go on for ages. I'm just aware of the time at the moment, and I think it's a good point now to move on to the buzz round, which is focused a lot on AI, but the human aspect of AI, which is something we touched on earlier. And I ask every guest 3 questions, hopefully uncovering a piece of knowledge or value or attitude that guides you. So short, punchy answers and whatever comes to mind, no wrong answers. All right. What's the most innovative way you've seen AI used to strengthen relationships?
I think a lot of people feel afraid to share how they're really feeling. And Deepak Chopra, who I've done some work with years ago, before all the AI really exploded, had something really amazing on a charitable website that he had, where it was an AI that helped prevent suicide. So whether it was old people who felt lonely, young people, and I think sometimes just this element of companionship and having somebody that you can talk to without fear of being judged is a great gift that people can use AI for.
Yeah, I think that's a really important aspect, what you mentioned there, the not having the fear of being judged.
Mm.
And I see, you talked earlier a lot about the becoming more self-aware, and I see that's a really wonderful way that you could use AI, because I know I've done it. I've shared things that I probably wouldn't share with anyone except my very closest loved ones, and have that conversation and then get something reflected back that, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and AI can also provide tools. I know I've given you a lot of tools. I invite you. What are the best tools for me? What are the top 3 tools you would invite me to start working on today, or even 1 tool?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's using it as a kind of a search engine, but a search engine that knows a bit about you.
Yeah.
All right. Thinking about your own experience, what's the best thing you've done to integrate AI in a way that enhances human connection?
Wow. Well, we did something really cool. It was very unexpected. Never did I ever, I thought you were going to think I would write a children's book. And one day I was walking down the streets of Lisbon, and tears are flowing down my face as I'm narrating this book, this children's book. And a few months later, a friend of mine's a film director. She actually worked with what's his name, Quentin Tarantino, I think, on Pulp Fiction. And to thank me for all the work that I've done in introducing her to people, etc., she said, "Jen, I want to animate this for you." And Jurgen, oh my God, this woman took Midjourney AI, right, and created an animated short film of about just over 2 minutes to my voice narrating the book. And I cannot wait. It's going to be available in the next few weeks. And just the response we've gotten, we already have people who want to translate it into German and Spanish and other languages. So that was something. Never did I ever think I would write a book and then have it be turned into my own little film that I can share with the world to help kids and adults.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's it's quite amazing what can be done these days with taking something that you create and taking it well beyond what you can imagine is possible.
Exactly.
All right. Now, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves in this age of AI in a way that they prioritize authentic human connection.
I was just working with some clients on this earlier this week, and one of my favorite things that you can do for AI as a coach and a consultant, I love now. I actually record conversations. I'll be on Zoom and maybe Otter or whatever AI I'm using will be taking notes on the meeting, but then I'll be simultaneously using it as a coach to me and my clients or consultants. And I'll say, hey, I was working with these brilliant women who are running a successful company, and we were talking about how they integrate AI into their business, et cetera, et cetera. And one of my favorite things to do is to look at something a friend of mine wrote years ago called Your Life by Design, where it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid is all the stuff you hate, like taking out the trash, doing Excel spreadsheets, admin, whatever. And so you basically fill this pyramid up till you get to the tippy top of the pyramid with the stuff that brings you joy. These clients of mine were talking about, they have their own podcast, how much they love engaging with the listeners, making each other laugh, being of service, getting stories told that uplift and inspire. And so it was really amazing because number one, we're doing all of this using tech. Then we're recording simultaneously with chat on the side. And then I had chat put together diagrams and spreadsheets and all of this. And I think that sometimes there's the nuances in conversation, but when I specifically direct the one I use, which is chat, to help take notes and to create these beautiful things, we had like 3 full documents and things to help them understand what they needed to outsource. And I think that's what AI is offering us. I know so many people are afraid of it, but what if you could do more of the things that inspire, uplift your soul, and put a smile on your face and the face of others? And then we outsource the stuff at the bottom of the pyramid. And what if you could use AI to do that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful example, and certainly one that I'll be exploring some more.
Highly recommend.
I have done a lot with the transcriptions that I get from meetings I've had, and from something simple like just writing up the agenda or the minutes. I did something interesting today. I thought, no, that's sort of cool. There was a business survey done by the organization who our community bank franchises with. We're a franchise, and they're looking at rehashing the franchise model. And there was a 10-page survey with a lot of questions. And so I went through and answered all the questions. And then I thought, I wonder if I've covered everything from our strategic document and our 10-year strategic plan that we've just recently done. And I thought, the easy way to do this is I've got a project in an AI, a custom AI that has the strategic plan and has our monthly meetings there that I kind of wrap all together and make sure that we're revising that strategic plan, that it keeps it alive and a living document, and we're taking action on it. And I thought I'll feed my answers into that. And it was interesting. It came back with about half a dozen things that I hadn't recalled and I hadn't taken into account. And so I added those to the survey. I thought that's cool application. So there's a lot of things that it can enhance, but yeah, doing it live in meetings, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz, Jennifer, and thanks for the conversation so far. It's been wonderful. Now, where can people find out more about you, about OptiMatch, the work you do, and maybe even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared today?
Oh, absolutely. So people can go to om.app, om.app/survey. You can try for free the OptiMatch survey, find out how you're motivated. Are you a lychee, apple, mango, or pear? You can also find information on how we're even more rigorously scientifically testing what we've done on omhorizons.org. That's our new nonprofit to do some really substantive research along with one of our medical advisors out of Columbia to further evidentially base what we've already done thus far. And I encourage you to check out Inspired Living Tools. You can find me, you'll find me on LinkedIn there. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, mention that you've heard me on the show. And you can find out every week. And then when you get the Inspired Living Tools, I often share where I'm going to be speaking in the world and special discounts. Like I just negotiated everybody in my network $1,000 off a private cruise with Deepak Chopra in Antarctica. So you'll get special stuff like that if you go to Inspired Living Tools and subscribe to that newsletter.
Excellent. All right. And of course, we'll have those links in the show notes, so it's easy to click straight through. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights so generously today, Jennifer. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Learnt a whole bunch of new things, and probably going to go away and make a lot of notes now and look at. I should have a note taker running in the background here, shouldn't I? Anyway, I'll be following up on some of those things, but we'll have all the interesting stuff in the show notes, in the links. So all the best for the future, Jennifer, and please do stay in touch.
Thank you, Jürgen.